What Mr. Trump wants is for the United States to continue to dominate the economic trade situation with China. He wants China to stop cheating, and he wants to put tariffs on China. This is the new boy on the block, and he's a bully, and he's big. He's the biggest boy on the block. Nobody can touch the United States. Don't even think about using nuclear weapons or you'll lose us. You better do a deal with me, and you better not fool around with it, because I'll destroy you. China got their hands on a lot of critical minerals. They have some of themselves. They've got their hands on a lot of them around the world, but they don't belong to them. It was a critical piece of Putin's World War III, which is an asymmetrical war. Well, Iran is picked the wrong partner. Mr. Putin's going down. Okay, he's going down. He very much did not want this to happen. This is humiliating. Assad is a monster. He tortured people. He used chemical weapons on children. He's a terrible person.
Welcome back, everyone. Today we have Diane Francis, a senior fellow at Atlantic Council and editor-at-large for the National Post. Thank you so much, and pleasure to have you.
Nice to be here.
So we can jump right into it. I know you follow the Russia-China relationship pretty closely, and I'm sure you saw today Dmitry Medvedev, the former prime minister, said that Russia is open to negotiations now, and that happened right after he met with Chinese President Xi Jinping. What does that hint at, like how the meeting went?
Well, the Europeans and the Americans are very upset with China because it is helping Russia. It originally said it wasn't, and it wasn't direct. They're not directly sending weapons, but they're sending equipment and components that allow them to make weapons. And they're also buying cheap oil from them, which is financing their war. So is India, for that matter. So everybody's very annoyed with China and India for doing that, although it's understandable. But the implication from what is said, and I wasn't there, I didn't hear what he said and so on, is that, Medvedev was summoned to talk to Xi, who's the head of China, and China is telling everybody that they're pushing for a ceasefire and peace. They want the war to stop. They want to get on the good side of Trump, but also they've been pushing for this a long time. Let's not forget the fact that China and Russia have been enemies in the past. They're uneasy friends, and they're frightened of each other. And I think that China has repeatedly said privately, don't even think about using nuclear weapons, or you'll lose us, and all of that sort of thing. And going back to the beginning, just to retrace the ambivalence that China feels toward, or Xi feels toward Putin, is that Putin came to the Winter Olympics in Beijing and announced that they had signed a deal, that they were friends for life, that they were friends without limits. And he failed to tell Xi, when they did the big photo opportunity with the Winter Olympics in the backdrop, that he was planning to invade in 2 days a sovereign nation for no reason. He didn't even tell his friend for life that his plans were that. I don't think he dared to. And so, she was then caught in this awful position of having to remain supposedly friendly and play footsie with Putin, at the same time, certainly not wanting to risk losing all their customers in America and Europe by being in a tight alliance with them. So I kind of believe China when it says, it wants the war to end, and it's trying to do something in whatever way it can to dance around Putin to get him to cease fire.
And I know you covered this too. When North Korean troops got involved, China was not happy with that. And I wonder if Trump coming in office has any effect on Chinese-Russian relationship, or do you think that will continue probably? Like, does that change anything, or will continue as is?
Trump coming into office changes everybody's relationship with everybody. This is the new boy on the block, and he's a bully, and he's big. He's the biggest boy on the block. Nobody can touch the United States economically, militarily, and in terms of influence. So, this is a whole new equation in terms of geopolitics. He's completely upended it. I think that, China is going to be a target of tariffs and all kinds of other things because the Americans are fed up with the trade deficit situation, with the fact that in the past China's cheated and all that sort of thing, and is an arch rival economically. And, they've also, China's also hinted around that it wants Taiwan back in its fold, although I don't think Taiwan and China's not stupid. There's too many warships in the region that the Americans, the Australians, the Japanese, everybody has. There is no way they could invade Taiwan and get away with it. So, they're kind of caught in this situation, and they have to tiptoe a little bit around what Mr. Trump wants. Now, what Mr. Trump wants is for the United States to continue to dominate the economic trade situation with China. He wants China to stop cheating, and he wants to put tariffs on China because of the low prices and low labor rates they have, which gets them a lot of business in the U.S. And so China would earn, shall we say, brownie points if, in fact, they are seen to be even just talking about or trying to nudge Putin to get to the negotiating table. And so that's kind of the drama that's going on right now. And it's not going to stop Trump from being tough on China, but maybe he wouldn't be as tough. So they're trying to sort of be helpful.
And I know recently you covered how Ukraine should deal with Trump, which we'll link in the card above and in the description. I highly recommend our audience to go check out your Substack. But you had an interesting point there that I haven't seen mentioned in other places, where China is actually buying up assets in Ukraine. I wonder if that's going to create a conflict between Russia and China, because there was a theory going around, which we covered on our channel too, that Russia is really going after Ukraine for the minerals Ukraine has.
Yeah, well, I broke that story on my Substack, and it was what Zelensky and the others have realized, which other countries have to, is that Trump is not a historian, he's not a diplomat, he's not a strategist, he's a business guy. So make me an offer, give me a deal, let's win-win. And so that's his approach, and that's the approach you have to make. So what Zelensky has done in his victory plan is not only ask for more weapons to pummel the heck out of Russia, which is actually it's on the ropes economically, but he also has highlighted the fact that Ukraine is in Europe the wealthiest European country in natural resources, apart from Russia, which is mostly Asian, but still. And they have as many resources, according to some estimates, as Canada or Australia has. And people don't realize this. You think of it as an industrialized country, a innovative IT country, and certainly an agricultural giant. But this place is full of everything: fossil fuels, critical minerals, everything you want, and $26 trillion worth. And so what Zelensky's basically saying to Trump and to the Europeans to a certain extent, hey, get rid of this guy, help us get rid of this guy, and and help us rebuild the country, and we'll give you first rights to partner with us in all this wealth. And so it's a business proposition as much as anything else. It's not about, oh, we're a democracy, you got to save us, or these guys are bad. No, this is about making a deal. And that's something that Trump can certainly understand. Now, in the course of that, it's important to know, and I'm not many people, I think I'm the only one that's printed it, but there are a number of Ukrainian oligarchs before the war, because I was in Ukraine a lot before the war, who were working on behalf of the Chinese. And as proxies of the Chinese, they were snapping up all this wonderful farmland in Ukraine. And the former president of Ukraine, Poroshenko, in fact, surfaced as one of the biggest property landholders in the country. And I think he's a proxy for China because he made many visits to Beijing. So that's one thing. Another thing that Zelensky has, I think, said, there will be no Chinese ownership in Ukraine because they've helped the enemy. And that means that all these secret deals and hidden identities of ownership will have to become disclosed, and the Chinese will be kicked out, and they should be.
Another aspect is also just in reaction to the U.S. sanctions on China. China banned rare metals from their country, which apparently they kind of have a monopoly with, so they won't be exporting those to U.S. And they are very important in batteries, which is the timing is kind of not suspicious, I guess, interesting, since Trump coming into office, and he has, as you covered in your Substack, he has announced 10% potential tariffs on China. Can China really afford a trade war with U.S.?
Well, see, this is what's happening with a Trump as president. It's about negotiations. It's about deals. I'm going to slap, he says to Canada, a 25% tariff on you. Okay? Because you have a big trade surplus with us, 100 billion a year or whatever it is. And Canada's, the mouse that roars, and we have a very weak prime minister, and he says, oh, well, and we're thinking of putting export taxes on our oil shipments and our electricity shipments to the United States. So these are opening positions in a negotiation. People shouldn't take this seriously. It's not emotional. They have $100 billion trade surplus. They don't want it. They don't think it's necessary. So what are you going to do about it? You're going to reduce it. You're going to reduce it by either buying more American stuff or selling less of your stuff to them. And so it becomes a negotiation. And that is sort of what the Europeans are also stuck with. They've been told that they're going to get between 10 and 20% tariffs too. So one of the woman that Christine Lagarde, who runs the central bank in Europe, who's very smart. I've met her, very smart, and has tons of experience as a business person, a lawyer for businesses, and she lived in the States many years. She gets it. She knows the deal. She knows how it works. She's dealing with a real estate guy here from New York, a tough guy who trash talks, who scares you, who threatens, but he just wants to make a deal at the end of the day. So she said her advice was, don't plunge yourself into a crisis, Europe. Listen to what he's saying. Don't tut it. He's saying what he's saying. He wants to put 10, 20% because we have a big surplus with the U.S. in trade. So here's what we have to do. We have to buy more American stuff. Let's buy all our weapons from America. And by the way, we need, liquefied natural gas. Let's buy more from America. We'll get that surplus down to a net balance. Don't get all, silly and emotional and frightened and so on. Do something about it. Negotiate it. He'll be open to that. So that's really all that has to happen. Now with China, the issue of technology and critical minerals is a little different because it has to do with defense. It has to do with national security, with weapons making, with bombs and all that sort of thing. So that is a different thing. It's not like buying, plush toys from China. This is stuff that's serious and can affect the safety of the nation. So they're tougher on those things. But China has got their hands on a lot of critical minerals. They have some of themselves. They've got their hands on a lot of them around the world, but they don't belong to them. And the United States has critical minerals. Canada and Australia have critical minerals that aren't even being exploited. So those are the things that are going to happen. And if they start to play around with access to these things, then they're going to get hit with something else, and then you have to negotiate your way out of it.
Makes sense. Yeah. And also, like the point you brought up, yeah, other countries do have it. It was really like environmental concerns that they weren't being exploited. But if China is going to hold their supply hostage, I think more countries will have like the economic interest to do it, since the demand is always there. Shifting focus just a little bit to Syria, and the Assad regime, as we saw, fell very quickly. And the question I had, just wanted to get your thoughts, is like, why didn't Putin help? Like, is it because he couldn't help, which a lot of people were saying, or does Russia just not see Syria as important to their like global presence or global influence?
It was a critical piece of Putin's World War III, which is an asymmetrical war. He had thousands of troops. He had military bases. In my Substack newsletter, I have the naval base and the big military base they had, their air base. They were just overwhelmed. They're not very good at military stuff. Their soldiers are not motivated. They live in a horrible country and they're forced to be soldiers. And they have lousy generals and probably mediocre equipment. And the Syrians were not motivated any longer because, you know what? They didn't like Assad very much either. So, Assad was a puppet a Putin puppet and an Iranian puppet. And he was allowing his country to be used as a staging ground to create trouble all across the Midwest, the Middle East, as well as Africa. And eventually, the aim was Mediterranean and Europe. So he had a naval base on the Mediterranean, and he was going to open another one in Libya. And what was he going to do there? Putin's plans were to have Africans from the Sahel, or the southern part of Africa, pay for the right to get taken by ship across Mediterranean to weaponize migration into Europe, to destabilize it, to cause trouble, to create problems. These are all the games he plays. So he very much did not want this to happen. This is humiliating. Assad is a monster. He tortured people. He used chemical weapons on children. He's a terrible person. And, the Syrian people, even those that were, sort of captive under him, once he left, boy, they couldn't get rid of the situation fast enough. So Syrian troops stopped fighting. And the rebels had gained steam over a number of years. They were being supported and trained by the Americans in the north with the Kurds. They were being trained in Turkey by the Turks. They were also being trained by their own rebellious, pro-Syrian people and leaders. And so, the uprising happened. It overtook years to develop, but when it started, it happened very quickly. And the Iranians and the Russians were paper tigers and just melted away. And now they're humiliated. So he's lost a beachhead in the Middle East. He's lost a way of causing trouble in the Mediterranean. He's lost a means of making Israel's life miserable and the rest of the Middle East. And let's not forget that it was Russian mercenaries in the Wagner Group that trained the terrorists, the Hamas terrorists, that massacred Israelis on October 7th. That was a Russian operation. That was a Russian op with the Iranian proxies, terrorists, the Hamas and Hezbollah. So they've also been weakened by this sudden change in events. And my hope is that the Americans and the Turks, the United Nations, the Europeans, the Gulf oil countries will be in there quickly to try and help stabilize it and set up so it can transition to a decent, fair, just government with human rights for Syrians. Those people have suffered far too long, and it's terrible. Plus, once you get it stabilized, you're going to have it's going to have a shot in the arm in the form of 3 to 5 million Syrians who've lived in refugee camps in other countries as asylum seekers for years. They've been driven out of their country, and they're educated, and now they're very knowledgeable about capitalism and democracy and human rights, and hopefully they will go back and help turn it into a modern country, which it deserves to be. This is a big defeat for Vladimir Putin.
Exactly. And I know we saw something like this happen in Armenia too, where Putin backed out of his commitment to protect an ally, and Syria is getting way more attention, much bigger scale. I wonder if those two events, and I'm sure smaller events all around the world, are going to have an effect with Russia's relationship with its ally now that they see Russia's likely not going to honor any commitments when they need it.
Absolutely. It's bad. They walked away. They propped him up. They walked away. And then, he goes to Moscow with his family, Assad, and apparently he owns $40 million worth of high-priced palaces and condos, all stolen from people, all stolen from his people. He's a monster. And so hopefully he's hunted down one day. The other thing is that the world really has to give credit, great deal of credit for all of this to Ukraine. It was Ukraine that identified the mercenaries training in Syria and other guerrilla activities. And they actually tipped off Israel beforehand, but Israel didn't do anything about it, strangely. Why were they there? Because they were recruiting across the Middle East. The Russians were recruiting people from the Middle East and Africa to fight in their army in Ukraine to kill Ukrainians. So Ukrainians have been wise to this, have been doing all kinds of special ops, blowing up things, causing trouble there. And they were undoubtedly, they were the first to get involved, and they probably have helped these rebels.
Yeah, that's even insane, right? With Russia's history with intelligence, it's like they weren't able to catch that where Ukraine was able to. Like, that's crazy.
I think Ukrainians are very smart people.
100%. And another country that did play a big role in the fall of Assad is Turkey, and clearly big hit for Russia. How would that affect their relationship? Because they have this like on and off relationship where Turkey is in NATO too, but negotiates peace deals.
Yeah, Turkey is a real interesting country, and their leader. It's a democracy, maybe not as much of a democracy as other NATO members, and it's a member of NATO. It is a very prosperous country, and I wrote a Substack newsletter about Turkey in the last few months, and they are everybody's neutral partner. Erdogan is on speaking terms with everybody, and you know what? That's really smart. It doesn't mean that he is a turncoat or that it doesn't take sides. He does, but he has his finger in a lot of different things. So Turkey now is capable of getting out from under the burden of taking care of 3 million Syrian refugees, which they've been doing for years. And that's caused trouble in their economy with jobs and so on. And hopefully they've said, they've opened the border and they've said, hey, you guys go back home and, we're going to help prop up this country and make it a decent democracy and economy. So they're going to play a big role. However, there's one big however. In the northern half of what is Syria now, the Kurds basically, with American help, control that territory. They're going to have a piece of the pie. They're going to have a say. And the Kurds have been causing Turkey a lot of trouble inside Turkey because they have a Kurdish separation movement. They actually claim territory inside Turkey and territory inside Iran, territory inside Iraq, and all these countries, these old empires claiming stuff that they used to have hundreds of years ago. And this is why we have wars. This is what Russia's doing with Ukraine. So anyway, the Kurds are a good ethical group. And so there's going to be some tension there. There's going to have to be some accommodation. The new Syrian government is going to have to behave itself, where I think the Westerners will have to somehow intervene, not necessarily militarily. Israel and the United States are both bombing the heck out of the place in the meantime to get rid of all the weapons and the military facilities in the country so that they don't cause trouble anymore for a while. So hopefully the place will stay stable. The alliance of fighters will become an alliance of democratic leaders, and they'll make a nice country, and they'll get tons of money from the oil-rich Arabs, and they'll get tons of money from Europe and America and Turkey too. So that's my hope, big hope. But I think it's going to happen.
Yeah, let's hope, because especially Syria. But since Assad did fall and Hezbollah is weakened, Iranian proxy, and all this also showing that Russia probably not helping allies, I wonder how Iran is seeing all this and this kind of situation. Will it push Iran to maybe pursue nuclear weapons quicker than they would have otherwise?
Well, Iran is picked the wrong partner. Mr. Putin's going down. Okay, he's going down. And not fast enough, in my opinion. And that's their partner. And they scratch one another's backs and they kill people for one another. And I think Iran's worst nightmare, and Iran also has a restless population. These people live like slaves. It's awful. And they're in a terrible theocracy where women are treated like third-class citizens. And the fundamentalist, revolutionaries are hideously nasty to people. There's no human rights protection and so on. It's a terrible country. I think their worst nightmare is starting to come true. First of all, their buddy Russia's been driven from Syria. Secondly, Syria is now in the bosom of the West, who will do whatever they can to help make it a freedom-loving democracy with a nice economy and safety for its people, right next door to Iran. Not bordering, but close enough. And this is going to make their people more restless too. There's no question in my mind.
And I know reports came out today, Trump is planning strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities. Do you think that's do you think it's likely because Iran's pursuing nuclear weapons, or is, like you said earlier, probably just negotiations? It's like the first stop for negotiations. He wants a nuclear deal, and that's how he starts the negotiation.
Yeah, look, remember, Israel was debating whether or not to destroy their nuclear facilities too, as part of its retaliation for being bombed and attacked by Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran indirectly. So it's always a possibility. People wonder how far along they are. You get different reports. The Israelis have done a number of sabotage operations over the years to kill scientists, to do all kinds of things to stop it. Nobody wants them to have a nuclear bomb, a nuclear weapon. It's bad enough that they have all these drones and these missiles that they're selling to Russia and killing Ukrainians with. But he's threatening it, and this is part of the trash talk. Negotiations. Like, you want to do a deal with me? You better do a deal with me, and you better not fool around with it, because I'll destroy you. I mean, this is what it is. Does he mean it? Does he mean to threaten them? Absolutely. Because they need to be threatened. They need to be curtailed. They need to stop what they've been doing, whether that's still helping Russia or whatever. And so I say, good.
And I know you just mentioned earlier that the fall of Putin's coming, and you have some of the best coverage, like the internal Russian stuff that's going on, and that relates to the elites and the civil war that they have sometimes just spark up because of some company. I know recently you said that the casualties are actually starting to reach the Russian elites, because at the beginning Putin would try to just mobilize from minority regions, but the casualties are just so big that it's he has to do it for Moscow and stuff. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that, how.
Yeah, I think that one of the really smartest strategies that the Ukrainians did, and they've done plenty of them, is to take Kursk. They actually seized a chunk of Mother Russia. Oh my God, who would have thought? And they took it in hours, because their infantry just melted away. They were all kids. And there were a lot of casualties. And there's a nuclear plant there. And there's all kinds of stuff there. And the Russians haven't been able to counterattack and get it back. And this is their territory. Plus, they now have obtained permission and weapons to fire inside Russia. And they are doing some of this, and they certainly are doing it with their own homemade drones and weaponry. And they're creating huge problems. I mean, they're blowing up oil and energy facilities, oil export facilities. They just blew up a big pipeline. They're assassinating important people inside Russia. This is got to be making and is making the Russians nervous. Look, the importance to me of Kursk in terms of psycho warfare was that people were evacuated from there. I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of people. They all had relatives. They talked on the phone. Can we have a bedroom? We have to leave. So there was no censoring this news. It got inside the tent to all the people in Russia. And so that is a problem that he has to cope with. Not directly yet, but that's going to become a factor when it starts to unravel, if it does, because he's economically on the ropes. And he cannot sustain the spending he's sustaining. And eventually, I hope the Allies will start to make stopping the flow of oil to India and China an absolute strategic imperative. Most of it goes through the Baltic Sea, and NATO controls the Baltic Sea. Those tankers should not be allowed to travel, period, at all. So between blowing up pipelines and stopping the tankers, he comes to a halt. He's over. And so all of these things are increasing, and so is the bombing on both sides, because they're trying to have a last hurrah before they actually will be forced to sit down and sign some kind of a truce.
And yeah, so talking about the negotiations, as we know, it's very likely that we're going to get to talks at some point once Trump takes office. And there's two ways to look at it, right? Russia is making advances on the ground, even though it's very small, but they make it out to be a big deal. But the other side is the economy especially in the last month, seems to be really taking a hit, and no one knows how long like they can sustain this war economy, especially now that like 2025, a lot of people see this like probably the last year the Russian economy could continue. So do you see Russia coming to the negotiating table from like a stronger position because of the battleground gains they're making, or because of the economy they're going to be in a weaker position? So it's like US is going to have more leverage to push down a more of a fair deal.
I'm not sure there's going to be negotiations. I think Putin just says, we're done. We're done. No loss of face. We're done. I think he might just do that. He wouldn't withdraw his people, which means then essentially he's stolen 20% and gotten away with it. But at the other hand, and on the other hand, it would allow Ukraine to join NATO immediately, which they should. And so I just don't know. Putin's saying nothing. Zelensky has changed his bargaining position since Trump said, I want this over with by January 20th, imposing a deadline, which is a really smart thing to do. Otherwise, this goes on forever, like Korea. And they changed their position slightly in as much as saying, okay, let us in NATO and we'll give up some of our territory that you've stolen. That's a big move on the part of it. And Russia has said nothing. Russia said nothing. And this guy Medvedev, he's tried it out to make nuclear scare everybody about nuclear and all that sort of thing. But he's holding his cards. It's very interesting that the Ukrainian advances and offenses against inside Russia are taking a toll on the people. Now, is there going to be an uprising? No, he's a totalitarian dictator. I mean, he's got a secret service and an army that nobody can overthrow, and his oligarchs are all living, a nice life in New York and London and Paris with their money abroad. They're not really going to overthrow anything or push for anything. So it's really all up to the man in the bunker, and that's apparently where he is now. Like Hitler, he's in a bunker somewhere in Siberia, probably with his family, because his palaces became targets, and he preemptively blew both of them up. It's all very strange. So what's going on there is, I hope it's the final days of his regime, and I think that Trump, if he gets credit for bringing it to an end, that's fine. Doesn't bother me. Give him a Nobel Prize. I'd be happy. I don't care. I just want the shooting to stop.
Makes sense. Just last question. I know we are nearing the time we had, but do you think Ukraine is going to make it into NATO, or is that something is actually a red line for Russia?
No, they have to get into NATO, and they will. It may be a de facto getting into NATO. It may be, okay, let's stop fighting, leave the line where it is, okay, like a Korea situation. And we're not giving up on trying to get that land back, but we're going to do it diplomatically, which of course will never happen. But the killing is stopped. And then even if they're told, even if Russia convinces everybody that they can't let them join, or NATO doesn't want them to join NATO because they're still technically at war, I think what would work really well is if the Europeans put boots on the ground all along that line, and the Europeans guard Ukraine against Russia going forward at their cost, and the Americans are out of it. And that is the way it should end, in my opinion. And that will be a very good guarantee of safety.
100%. Yeah. Thank you so much. Always happy to learn from you. It's very interesting all the time, and hope to have you again.
Great. Thank you.